9-year-old girl overhears a shocking secret on her father's wedding day. Can she stop the betrayal before it's too late? Don't miss this shocking wedding twist. Watch till the end to see how a 9-year-old saves her dad's life. Like, share, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more unbelievable stories. The morning sun rose slowly over the bustling city of Lagos, Nigeria, its golden rays reflecting off the tall glass buildings and busy streets below. Vendors were already calling out from their stalls, selling puff-puff, roasted corn, and colorful aso ebi fabrics, while the air buzzed with the sounds of danfo buses honking and street preachers shouting praises. For most people, it was just another ordinary day. But for Chinedu Okafor, this was the most important day of his life. Inside a spacious, freshly painted house in Surulere, Chinedu stood before a mirror, adjusting his deep blue agbada with trembling hands. He was a man of 38, tall, broad-shouldered, with a clean-shaven head and kind eyes that had known both pain and resilience. For years, he had lived as a single father, raising his only daughter after his wife's death in childbirth. It had been hard, lonely nights, financial struggles, and the constant fear of failing his little girl. But today, all that felt like it was about to change. Today, he was going to marry Ngozi, a beautiful woman who had swept into his life like a storm. She was elegant, charming, and seemed to bring him joy in ways he hadn't felt in years. At least, that's what he believed. In the next room, Amara, his 9-year-old daughter, sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the lace dress laid out for her. It was a lovely white gown, with golden embroidery on the sleeves and a satin bow tied at the waist. Any other girl her age would have been excited to wear it and walk down the aisle as her father's little princess. But Amara wasn't smiling. She twirled a small doll in her hands, her brows furrowed in deep thought. There was something about Ngozi she couldn't trust. And it wasn't just the way Ngozi often dismissed her presence or how she called her stubborn behind her back. It was a feeling deep inside Amara's heart, a child's intuition whispering that something was wrong. "Amara, my darling," the booming voice of Auntie Ifeoma, Chinedu's elder sister, interrupted her thoughts. She walked in, dressed in a stunning green iro and buba, with a matching gil that towered gracefully on her head. "Why are you sitting here looking like someone stole your chin-chin? Today is a happy day." Amara forced a small smile. "Yes, Auntie." Ifeoma studied her closely, but she didn't press. She knew children often acted strange during big changes. She simply helped Amara into her dress, tied her bow neatly, and kissed her forehead. And meanwhile, in another part of the house, Ngozi stood in front of a large mirror, admiring her reflection in her wedding gown. It was imported lace from Italy, white with shimmering crystals that caught the light. She was undeniably stunning. Her friends and bridesmaids surrounded her, praising her beauty, adjusting her veil, and snapping pictures with their phones. But beneath her radiant smile, there was a flicker of calculation in her eyes. She wasn't just marrying Chinedu out of love, she was marrying him for security. Chinedu was financially stable, well-respected, and owned a successful, small construction company in Lagos. With him, her life would be comfortable, her status elevated, and if everything went according to plan, his wealth would one day be hers. As the women giggled around her, Ngozi stepped aside for a moment, pulling out her sleek iPhone. She dialed a number quickly, her voice low and sharp. "Yes, everything is set. By tonight, I'll be Mrs. Okafor," she whispered. "Don't worry, love. Just be patient. Once this marriage is sealed, the money will flow. He trusts me completely." She laughed softly, then ended the call before anyone could overhear. Or so she thought. From the hallway, Amara, on her way to fetch her shoes, had paused near the slightly open door. She froze as she heard Ngozi's voice. The words stung her ears like a slap. Love? Money? Trust? What was she talking about? Her heart pounded in her chest, but before she could understand it fully, one of the bridesmaids closed the door, blocking her view. Amara tiptoed back to her room, her mind spinning with confusion. Downstairs, Chinedu was receiving guests. The compound was decorated with colorful balloons and bright ribbons. Large pots of jollof rice simmered over firewood, while caterers arranged suya and fried plantain on trays. The sound of drums and talking drums echoed through the street as neighbors gathered, dancing and celebrating. Everyone seemed happy, everyone except Amara. She sat quietly under a mango tree, watching her father greet people with a big smile. He looked so happy, so full of hope, and that made her chest tighten even more. She wanted to tell him what she heard, but what if he didn't believe her? What if he thought she was just making it up because she didn't like Ngozi? Still, something in her gut told her she couldn't ignore it. Something bad was coming. The sun climbed higher, and the convoy of cars lined up, ready to drive to the grand event hall where the ceremony would be held. Chinedu called out cheerfully, "Amara, my jewel. Come, let's go. Today is the beginning of a new life for us." Amara walked toward him slowly, her little hands clutching her doll tightly. She looked up at her father's glowing face, then at Ngozi, who stood beside him with a triumphant smile. And in that moment, Amara made a silent promise to herself. If Ngozi truly meant harm, she would find a way to stop this wedding, no matter what it took. The convoy of cars crawled through the busy streets of Lagos, horns blaring as they cut through the afternoon traffic. At the front of the procession was a sleek black SUV carrying Chinedu, Ngozi, and little Amara. Music poured from loudspeakers tied to the cars, making heads turn as the decorated vehicles sped toward the event hall. For everyone, it was a celebration. But for Amara, it was a storm brewing silently inside her chest. She sat pressed against the window, watching hawkers chase after the cars with chilled bottles of Fanta and gala sausage rolls. Her small face, reflected against the glass, looked troubled. Chinedu, dressed sharply in his agbada, noticed her silence. "My jewel," he said softly, leaning down to her. "Why so quiet? This is a happy day." Amara forced a smile. "I'm happy, Daddy." But deep down, she wasn't. The words she had overheard still echoed in her ears. "By tonight, I'll be Mrs. Okafor. Once this marriage is sealed, the money will flow. He trusts me completely." She bit her lip and clutched her doll tighter. Could it be that Ngozi doesn't love Daddy at all? The convoy arrived at a large event center in Victoria Island, decorated in dazzling colors of white and gold. A red carpet stretched across the entrance, where ushers in matching uniforms welcomed guests with wide smiles. Inside, the hall was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, flowers lined the aisles, and traditional drummers pounded their talking drums in rhythm, filling the air with energy. Ngozi stepped out of the car gracefully, her gown shimmering like the stars. She waved at the cheering guests, soaking in their admiration. She looked every bit like a queen, her beauty undeniable. To the crowd, she was perfect. But Amara's little eyes followed her every move with suspicion. She noticed how Ngozi's smile faltered the moment no one was watching, or how her fingers twitched nervously as if guarding a secret. Inside the bridal suite, while Chinedu was busy greeting old friends, Ngozi slipped away to take another phone call. Amara, still restless, had wandered near the corridor when she caught her voice again. This time, the words were even more shocking. "Yes, Emeka." "Calm down," Ngozi whispered harshly into her phone. "Don't be foolish. Once the vows are exchanged, half of everything is as good as mine. You'll get your share. Just trust me. Tonight, after the party, we'll meet." Amara gasped quietly, her little hands flying to her mouth. The name Emeka was unfamiliar, but the way Ngozi said it, soft, desperate, almost romantic, was enough. Ngozi suddenly turned, sensing someone's presence. Amara ducked behind a chair, heart thumping in her chest. She held her breath until Ngozi walked back into the hall, her dazzling smile firmly back in place. Amara trembled, She was just 9 years old, but she knew enough about lies to recognize one. Ngozi was planning something bad, something that would hurt her father. Later, as guests settled into their seats and the priest prepared his notes, Amara sat quietly beside Auntie Efeoma. The wise woman noticed her niece's unease. She leaned down and whispered, "Amara, why do you look like a goat taken to the market?" Amara hesitated, twisting the hem of her dress. "Auntie, I think Ngozi doesn't love Daddy." Ifeoma chuckled at first. "Eh? My dear, you are just jealous. It is normal for a child to feel strange when their parent is remarrying." "No, Auntie," Amara insisted, her voice trembling. "I heard her twice. She was talking on the phone. She said after the marriage she will take Daddy's money. She called someone named Emeka. She said she loves him." Ifeoma's face tightened. She stared at Amara carefully. The child's eyes were too serious, too frightened for it to be a made-up story. But Ifeoma also knew the danger of speaking such words without proof. "My dear," she whispered back, "be careful with your words. This is a wedding, not a child's game. If what you say is true, then we must find proof. Do you understand?" Amara nodded silently. As the ceremony began, the hall grew quiet. The priest stood at the altar, his voice booming as he welcomed everyone. The choir sang in soft harmonies, their white robes glowing under the lights. Guests leaned forward in anticipation as the bridal procession began. Chinedu looked proud and nervous as he took his place at the front. He caught sight of Amara in the crowd, her small hands folded in her lap, her eyes full of worry. He thought it was nerves and gave her a reassuring smile, but Amara's thoughts were racing. What if Daddy doesn't believe me? What if everyone thinks I'm lying? She glanced at Ngozi walking down the aisle, her veil covering her satisfied smile. The crowd gasped at her beauty, phones raised to capture the moment. But Amara wasn't dazzled. She felt sick inside. Her father was about to marry a woman who didn't love him, a woman planning to betray him. Amara gripped her doll tighter and made up her mind. If nobody else would stop this wedding, she would. The hall echoed with the priest's words as he prepared to begin the vows. But in the shadows, the battle had already begun. In the heart of a 9-year-old girl who carried the truth no one else wanted to see. The wedding hall glittered like a palace. Golden drapes flowed from the ceiling. The chandeliers sparkled with light. And the smell of freshly cooked jollof rice, fried plantain, and spicy goat meat drifted in the air. Guests in bright aso ebi filled the seats, their laughter and chatter mixing with the sounds of drums and high-life music. It was a celebration worthy of Lagos high society. At the front of the hall, Chinedu Okafor stood tall and proud, his agbada glimmering under the lights. His smile stretched wide as he greeted old friends and business partners. His eyes, however, kept flickering toward the entrance, eagerly awaiting the arrival of his bride. Behind him, Amara sat in the first row beside Auntie Efeoma, her little hands folded tightly on her lap. She should have been happy, surrounded by balloons, flowers, and the joy of the moment, but her heart was heavy. The secret she carried gnawed at her like a sharp thorn. She watched her father's face glowing with excitement. He looks so happy, she thought sadly. But if I tell him what I know, will he even believe me? Or will he think I'm just a jealous little girl? The music shifted. The talking drums grew louder. The choir began to sing a soft hymn. All eyes turned to the entrance. And then Ngozi appeared. Dressed in her flowing white gown, sparkling veil, and diamond jewelry, she looked like a goddess. The crowd gasped, and phones flashed as guests scrambled to capture the perfect shot. Her smile was dazzling, but behind the veil, her eyes glinted with triumph. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Amara's stomach twisted. She couldn't stop staring at Ngozi, remembering the hushed phone calls, the promises of money, the name Emeka. The words replayed in her head like a broken record. Once the vows are exchanged, half of everything is mine. Tonight, after the party, we'll meet. Her father, unable to hide his joy, stepped forward as Ngozi walked slowly down the aisle, escorted by her uncle. The drummers beat louder, and the entire hall clapped to the rhythm. The sight was mesmerizing for everyone, except Amara. She whispered to Auntie Ifeoma, her voice trembling, "Auntie, we have to stop this. Please. She doesn't love Daddy." Ifeoma frowned, looking around nervously. "My dear, not now. If you are right, we need proof. But if you speak without proof, they will call you a liar." Amara shook her head. "I don't need proof. I just know." Her aunt sighed, torn between her niece's desperation and the fear of ruining the ceremony. At the altar, the priest lifted his Bible and smiled warmly at the couple standing before him. "Dearly beloved," he began in a booming voice, "we are gathered here today in the presence of God and witnesses to join this man, Chinedu Okafor, and this woman, Ngozi Namani, in holy matrimony." The crowd murmured in approval, their faces glowing with excitement. Chinedu looked at Ngozi with eyes full of love. "Finally," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Ngozi smiled back sweetly, hiding the storm in her heart. "Soon, everything will be mine," she thought. The priest continued. "Marriage is a sacred union, not to be entered lightly. It is built on trust, love, and devotion." As he spoke, Amara's heart pounded harder and harder. Her father's life was about to be destroyed by a lie, and everyone around her was blind to it. The priest turned to Chinedu. "Do you, Chinedu Okafor, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "Yes, I do," Chinedu said with confidence. The crowd clapped, whistles and shouts of joy filling the hall. The priest smiled and turned to Ngozi. "And do you, Ngozi Namani, take this man to bar your lawfully wedded husband?" Ngozi opened her mouth to speak, but before the words could leave her lips, a small but determined voice rang out through the hall. "Stop!" The hall fell silent. Heads turned in shock. Guests gasped. The drummers froze mid-beat. Everyone's eyes fell on the source of the voice, Amara, standing in her little white dress, her doll clutched tightly in her arms, her face pale but determined. She stepped into the aisle, her voice louder now. "Daddy, please don't marry her. She doesn't love you." The silence deepened, broken only by murmurs from the guests. Ngozi's face stiffened behind her veil. Chinedu blinked in confusion, his smile fading. "Amara, what are you saying?" "She doesn't love you," Amara cried, tears welling in her eyes. "She just wants your money. She's lying to you." Gasps spread across the hall. People began whispering, some looking at Ngozi with suspicion, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Ngozi forced a laugh, though her hands trembled slightly. "Oh, Pastor, please forgive this child. She is only jealous. You know how children can be, afraid of change." But Amara shook her head, her small voice trembling with courage. "No, Daddy. I heard her. She was talking to someone named Emeka. She said she will take your money after the wedding." The hall erupted into chaos. Guests muttered loudly, some demanding answers, others staring at Ngozi. Chinedu's face went pale. He looked from his daughter to his bride, confusion and fear flooding his eyes. "Ngozi, is this true?" Ngozi's smile faltered. Her hands gripped her bouquet so tightly that the flowers trembled. And in that moment, for the first time, cracks began to show in her perfect mask. The wedding hall was no longer filled with music or laughter. Instead, it was buzzing with gasps, whispers, and uneasy glances. Guests leaned toward each other, trying to make sense of the shocking interruption. At the center of it all stood Amara, her small body trembling, but her voice ringing with the truth. She pointed directly at Ngozi, her eyes blazing with courage. "She doesn't love Daddy," she cried again, louder this time. "She only wants his money." She told someone named Ameka she would meet him tonight after the wedding. A collective gasp spread through the hall like a wave. The drummers, who had been frozen in place, lowered their sticks. The choir exchanged nervous looks. Even the priest shifted uncomfortably, his Bible clutched tightly in his hands. Chinedu's face was a storm of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and a father's instinct to protect his child all colliding at once. His eyes darted between his daughter and the woman he was about to marry. "Amara," he said, his voice breaking. What are you saying?" Ngozi's veil quivered as she forced a shaky laugh. She stepped forward gracefully, trying to salvage the moment. "My love," she said sweetly, "please don't let this child spoil our happiness. She's scared, that's all. Children sometimes imagine things when they feel left out. You know she has always struggled with the idea of me becoming her new mother." The guests murmured. Some nodded, agreeing with her explanation, while others eyed her suspiciously. But Amara refused to back down. Her voice cracked with desperation. "I'm not lying. I heard her. 2 times. She was talking on the phone. She said, 'Once the vows are exchanged, half of everything is mine.' She called someone Love and promised to meet him after the party." Her words echoed in the hall, slicing through the noise. Auntie Ifeoma stood abruptly, her face stern. "Enough pretending, Ngozi. This child is not foolish. If Amara says she heard it, then we must take her seriously. Children see what adults often ignore." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward Ngozi, waiting for her reaction. Ngozi's mask began to slip. Her eyes darted nervously across the hall. Her hand gripped her bouquet so tightly that petals began to fall. "Are you all really going to believe the words of a child?" she snapped, her sweet tone replaced with sharpness. "She's just a little girl. She doesn't understand anything. This is jealousy, nothing more." But her anger only made the whispers grow louder. "Jealousy?" one woman whispered. "No, I believe the child," another guest muttered. "God forbid. Has this marriage been a scam all along?" a man asked, shaking his head. Chinedu raised his hand for silence. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He turned slowly to Ngozi, his voice low but steady. "Answer her, Ngozi. Who is Amika?" The hall went dead silent, all eyes fixed on the bride. Ngozi's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes flickered with panic, and for the first time, her flawless confidence cracked. Amara, with tears streaming down her cheeks, clutched her doll and whispered, "Please, Daddy. Believe me. Don't let her hurt us." Chinedu's chest heaved as he stared at his daughter, the one person who had never lied to him, who had always been his source of truth. His mind swirled with doubt, fear, and the sting of betrayal. The priest cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we should pause the ceremony until—" Before he could finish, a voice from the back of the hall rang out, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Ask her again. Who is Amika?" The crowd turned, shocked, as the doors of the hall swung open. A tall man stepped inside, his dark suit rumpled, his eyes burning with anger. It was Amika. Gasps erupted across the hall. Guests craned their necks, whispers exploding like wildfire. "Who is that? Is that her lover?" "Chai!" "This is a disgrace." Ngozi froze, her bouquet slipping from her hand and crashing to the floor. The hall that had once celebrated her beauty was now a cage closing in. Her secrets, once whispered in shadows, had burst into the light for all to see. The wedding hall had turned into a storm. The choir stopped singing, the drummers dropped their sticks, and even the priest stepped back in shock. All eyes locked on the tall man at the back of the hall, Emeka. His face was tense, his jaw set like stone, and his eyes burned with betrayal. The moment he entered, the air grew heavier. Guests whispered among themselves, their voices filled with shock and disgust. Ngozi's breath hitched. Her perfectly crafted mask of elegance crumbled in an instant. She staggered backward, her veil slipping slightly, revealing a face twisted with fear. "Emeka," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Emeka's voice thundered across the hall. "Don't Emeka me. Tell them the truth, Ngozi. Tell them how you used me, and how you plan to use this man." The crowd erupted into loud murmurs. Some gasped, others hissed in anger. All the admiration Ngozi had gathered evaporated like smoke. Chinedu, standing frozen at the altar, felt his chest tighten. His mind screamed that this couldn't be real, but the evidence was right before his eyes. His daughter's words, the sudden appearance of Emeka, and Ngozi's broken composure all fit together like jagged pieces of a puzzle. "God forbid," someone shouted from the audience. "This is shameful," another cried. "Chai, women of nowadays," an elderly man muttered, shaking his head. Ngozi tried desperately to regain control. She raised her trembling hands. No, listen, this isn't what you think. He is lying. He came here to ruin everything. He wants to destroy me because I rejected him." But Emeka stepped forward, his voice cutting like a blade. "Lies, Ngozi. You promised me everything. You said once you married him, the money would be ours. Did you not call me your real love? Did you not plan to meet me tonight after the party?" The hall fell silent again. Every guest leaned in, waiting for her response. Ngozi's lips quivered. Her eyes darted left and right, searching desperately for an escape. Then, like a final dagger, Amara's small voice broke the silence. "I told you. She doesn't love Daddy." The little girl clutched her doll tightly, her face wet with tears. But her eyes were steady, filled with a bravery far beyond her years. Chinedu's knees nearly buckled. He turned slowly to his daughter, his voice shaking. "Amara, you knew all along?" She nodded. "I heard her on the phone. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't let her hurt you, Daddy." Chinedu's heart broke in two, half with sorrow for being blind, half with gratitude for his daughter's courage. He turned sharply to Ngozi, his voice booming like thunder. "Answer me, Ngozi. Was all of this—" He gestured to the flowers, the guests, the altar. "Nothing but a lie? Was I just your ticket to wealth?" Ngozi's chest heaved. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smudging her makeup. Her words tumbled out in desperation. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I wanted security. I wanted a better life. Yes, I loved Emeka, but he has nothing. You?" She pointed at Chinedu, her voice breaking. "You had everything. I thought I could have both. I thought I could keep my heart with him, and my future with you." The confession hit the hall like a lightning strike. Gasps, shouts, and angry murmurs erupted everywhere. "Shameless! She played him. What kind of woman does this?" Even the priest shook his head, closing his Bible with a heavy sigh. Chinedu's chest burned with rage, his hands clenched into fists. He had been ready to give her his name, his trust, his life, yet all she wanted was his money. His eyes fell on Amara, who was still trembling, and guilt washed over him. He had almost sacrificed his daughter's happiness for a woman's lies. With a deep breath, Chinedu spoke, his voice steady but filled with fury. "Ngozi, this wedding is over. Whatever dream you had of becoming Mrs. Okafor ends today." The hall erupted into cheers of support. Guests clapped, some even stood to applaud, while others shouted, "Yes, and God bless this man." Ngozi's knees gave way, and she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Her veil slid off completely, leaving her face bare, no longer a picture of beauty, but of shame. Emeka turned his back and stormed out, disgust written all over his face. And in the middle of the chaos, Chinedu knelt down to his daughter's level. His eyes softened, his voice trembling as he cupped her tiny hands. "My jewel," he whispered, "you saved me. You saved us." Amara broke down, burying her face in his chest. "I just didn't want her to hurt you, Daddy." Tears filled Chinedu's eyes as he hugged her tightly, a father's pride and gratitude flowing through him. For the first time, he realized his daughter's instincts were sharper than his own. The guests watched the tender scene in silence, some wiping their eyes. It wasn't the wedding they expected, but it was a moment none of them would ever forget. The wedding hall no longer felt like a celebration, but like a courtroom where truth had been served. Guests whispered and shook their heads, some already leaving in disappointment, others staying just to witness the last act of this shocking drama. Ngozi was still on the ground, her sobs echoing under the high ceiling. Her once proud poise had turned into humiliation. She reached out weakly toward Chinedu, her voice cracking. Please, forgive me. Don't let it end like this. I can change. I will love you. I promise. But Chinedu looked down at her with cold eyes. His voice was steady, final, and unshaken. Love cannot be bought, Ngozi, and trust, once broken, can never be restored. You showed me your true self today, and it is not a future I want for myself or my daughter. His words sliced through the hall like a blade. Ngozi's pleas dissolved into silence as she realized the finality of his decision. The priest, with a heavy sigh, closed the ceremony altogether. This union cannot continue. May God guide us all to truth and wisdom. Guests began to leave, shaking their heads and whispering. Some comforted Chinedu with pats on the back, others praised little Amara for her courage. Such a wise child, an elderly woman said. God truly used her to save her father. As the hall slowly emptied, Chinedu lifted Amara into his arms. The weight of the day still pressed on him, but her little arms around his neck gave him strength. He kissed her forehead gently. I almost made the biggest mistake of my life, Amara. But you opened my eyes. Amara looked at him with tear-filled eyes. I was scared you wouldn't believe me, Daddy. But I couldn't stay quiet. Chinedu's throat tightened. You are braver than me, my jewel. And I promise you, from today, I will always listen. Always. They stepped out of the hall together, the late afternoon sun casting golden rays over the churchyard. The warm light felt like a fresh beginning, washing away the darkness of betrayal. Across the courtyard, Emeka stood leaning against a car, his face still hard with anger. But when his eyes met Chinedu's, there was no more hostility, only silent understanding. He gave a brief nod before walking away, leaving Ngozi to face her ruin alone. Ngozi, abandoned and disgraced, remained seated inside the emptying hall. The rich fabrics of her gown looked meaningless now. She had lost everything: her love, her plan, and the respect of society. Her dreams of wealth had crumbled into ashes. Meanwhile, father and daughter walked out into the bustling Lagos streets together. The sound of honking cars, street vendors calling out, and children laughing filled the air. It was a reminder that life goes on, no matter how dark one moment may feel. Chinedu took Amara's small hand in his. What do you say we get some suya and ice cream? Amara's face lit up instantly. Yes, Daddy, she said, her voice full of joy again. For the first time in months, Chinedu smiled. Not the forced smile he wore during courtship, but a real one, born from relief and gratitude. As they walked away, hand in hand, the people on the street looked at them and saw not a broken groom and a ruined wedding, but a father and daughter who had defeated deceit together. The betrayal was painful. The humiliation was deep. But out of it rose something stronger, a bond that could never be broken, and a promise that no matter what, they would always stand by each other. The story of the wedding that never happened spread across Lagos for weeks. Some told it with laughter, others with tears. But to Chinedu and Amara, it wasn't just gossip. It was the day their lives were saved, by the voice of a little girl who loved her father too much to stay silent. And so, as the sun dipped low and the streets glowed with evening lights, father and daughter walked home, together, stronger, and ready for a new beginning.